Hello and welcome to the latest Path to Power. I'm Matt Cooper.
And I'm Ivan Yates.
This is one we prepared for you earlier. Yes, we do take holidays. And Ivan and myself decided just before we went away for our short August break, all we get as self-employed people is 2 weeks break. And because we're self-employed people, we also prepare work for the period while we're away. So this was recorded shortly before you hear this today. Hopefully, it's all still relevant, because what we're going to talk about is a longer term issue, which is the introduction of a Department of Infrastructure and a minister with responsibility for that, something that Simon Harris highlighted when he was at the McGill Summer School back in July as one of his ambitions. We're also going to look forward to we're going to talk about Simon Harris and the impact that he has had as the TikTok Taoiseach. And we're going to look to another election that's a year out, but the path to power to the presidency, who will be going to Oras an Uachtaráin, because there's all sorts of speculation about what becomes a popularity contest amongst individuals. We'll get to that in a little while. But let's start with the TikTok Taoiseach, Simon Harris, the whirlwind, the man who's flying around the place and doing everything. Hopefully he has just enjoyed a little bit of downtime with his family and a little bit of a break at the start of August. But you were, well, would it be fair to say, sceptical about the impact that he could have? Because you felt that Leo Varadkar had let Fine Gael down by resigning 7 weeks ahead of the European local elections. And yet Simon Harris seems to have taken to the job with gusto. And this Higgins hurricane, or whatever you want to call it, doesn't seem to be abating as yet, is it?
First of all, my analogy was that there was a direct parallel between the Tories in Britain who went into power under Cameron in 2010, and then to Kenny leading Fine Gael, being in successive governments since 2011. And my iron rule of politics is you don't get a fourth term, and that was reflected, by the end of it, the Tories were toxic and Starmer sailed in, albeit with 33% of the vote. But the point is this, that the narrative in terms of the parallels was actually genuine. And I think the lowest point for Fine Gael was after the referendums, whereby not only had they got it wrong, they kind of got it spectacularly wrong. And in rural Ireland and in what you call Middle Ireland, the boxes were 8-1 against. And it showed a disconnect between the political bubble, the cabinet and the people. And this led to a situation where this was because this was the first plebiscite in years where we asked the audience the question. And so Leo's motivation for going, I think, was almost like that grounded ship in Italy. The captain is the first to get off, and was seen as a hospital pass that he was giving, and so on.
Sorry, that was your opinion. I disagreed.
Yeah, you
did.
Yes. So, what? To this extent, you are absolutely vindicated. One, the whirlwind that is Harris completely transformed the electoral performance. They gained a European seat in the Midlands Northwest. They held on to that seat, I should say, and that was quite spectacular with Nina Carberry. Unpredictable that they would get that second seat with Maria Walsh. So, secondly, they got 245 councillors or something like that, which again, I think without Harris, it would have been below 200. So there's no question he's changed the fortunes. But also, he's made a couple of critical personnel changes by appointing Olwen Enright as an outsider, living in Donegal with Joe McHugh, her husband, and out of politics, a daughter of Tom Enright and a former TD. She has been no shit Sherlock in 51 Upper Mount Street and has completely transformed the zeitgeist that John Carroll had vis-a-vis. She's director of organisation, both on the candidacy side and the whole organisational side. It has given a dose of adrenaline to the party, and people now are going before conventions, multiple people, whereas previously the narrative was people leaving the ship, retirements and so on. There's a queue of people. That means they think there's a seat to be won. So I would say that the chart they were on was to get 25 seats. They now have realistic chances, I'm not saying they will get it, of 40 seats, whereas Fianna Fáil, I think, are looking at 45. So you have to say scores on the doors, which politicians are ultimately judged by. However, And so, therefore, his other appointment, I think, of Professor Stephen Kinsella as economic advisor will be pivotal vis-a-vis a credible manifesto that sets Fine Gael apart with new ideas as opposed to standing on the record of 14 years in office. However, some of the instant quick fixes he's had, like the Dubai case, like a number of specific things, do you say the reset of Anglo-Irish relations while Micheál Martin was in darkest Africa, was all clever politics and good optics. That is sort of what should be the Department of Foreign Affairs. He was sort of taken to himself. And anything that he can get good news story out of, like a couple of weeks ago, he went over to the Team Olympics, like the Taoiseach going to Paris to, gee up the boys and girls that are,
and hold on a second. He was one of about 100 national leaders who had been invited by Macron to go. So there was a big sort of summit. So it wasn't like he just went off on a solo run. Now, I do say in relation to that, I mean,
good PR opportunity.
It is. He loves being Taoiseach, and he loves the thing about going to events like the Olympic Games, that he wouldn't get invited to the opening ceremony if he wasn't Taoiseach. And that comes back to the thing about that, he keeps saying, and he said it at the McGill Summer School there last month in Donegal as well, this government is going full term, this will go to March and all the rest of it. And everyone rolls their eyes and says, that's not going to happen, you're going to be going earlier. But I still think he loves the job so much, he will hold on to it for as long as he can for fear that he loses the election and that he mightn't get another chance to have a go at it.
Yeah, but the point is there's a modus operandi now established that someone in his office is looking like what's on the front page of the newspapers today that he can have an impact on and have a PR statement out on and maybe make some impact.
So he jumps into photo opportunities. Yeah. I mean, there's even the belief that when he hears about even Fianna Fáil, Micheál Martin or others getting an opportunity, he jumps in and sort of checks where the booking is and gets them in.
And he's sort of minister for everything as well. You know what I mean? That he's
but you say, in fairness to him, I mean, people, Enda Kenny had this. I mean, I think in retrospect, Enda Kenny's tenure keeps looking better than maybe perhaps people gave him credit for at the time. But one thing that Enda Kenny had was a genuine ability to meet with people, and he enjoyed meeting people. You got the impression that he'd have a chat with you, and I'm not saying this he'd have a chat with me or you, given that I'm in the media, you're a former politician. I've seen him with it. He genuinely enjoyed meeting people, the backslapping, the shaking hands and the rest of it, more so I think even than Bertie Ahern did, because Bertie was sort of like, shake hands, move on. Simon Harris has that Enda Kenny thing about him, where he seems to genuinely enjoy meeting people and finding out about them and having a smile for them.
So I'm of the school that all political careers, unless you time your own choosing, Joe Biden being the latest example, you're forced out of office at the end. So the point at which Harris is at, 80 days, his Taoiseach 90 days, the fact of the matter is he's still in the honeymoon phase. And actually, this business of getting up in the morning at 5 a.m. while it's bright, in the middle of November and January, when it's bleeding, perishing outside, and it only gets bright at 8 o'clock, I wonder, will he have the same energy? And, you do get burnt out in every walk of job. A CEO comes in, shiny new thing. It's just, you cannot sustain it forever. And so therefore...
So he's also apparently, and he's well over 100 days now at this stage, but he also is very demanding apparently of not just the people in his immediate circle, who are also, I think, young and energetic and the rest of it, but all the other ministers and all the various others, and even people within Fine Gael. There's almost a sort of an eye rolling, Jesus, he doesn't expect this to be done now, does he?
Yeah, which is a good thing. It's a good thing because people go stale in power, and certainly, it's great saying I was with power. And when you're a teacher, you have power. If you don't use it, you lose it. And so therefore, I think he's right to do all those things. And he knows, even by any trajectory, this is going to be truncated by an election.
But you actually already have put your finger on one of the reasons why he might, despite everyone telling him not to, want to go to March, because I mentioned the Paris Olympics. He gets a chance to go to that. He gets a chance to go to EU summits. If he causes an early election, he could lose it, or Fine Gael could be back in power, but they might have less seats than Fianna Fáil, which means Micheál Martin returns as Taoiseach. He becomes Taoiseach. That means that come March, to go and meet, be it Kamala Harris or Donald Trump in the White House.
It's a bit of a downer.
Yeah, I can imagine it'd be a massive downer for him if he finds himself in the situation whereby having only had, if he goes for a November election, having had less than 6 months as Taoiseach, he suddenly finds, well, now I'm number 2 boy again.
So where he's going to hit a rock in the road, in my opinion, is that some problems, like our housing crisis, are not going to be responsive to quick fix solutions. They're actually very deep-rooted, quite complex. Some of them are structural problems, some of them are legal problems, and some of them are financial problems. And therefore, with the case of Cathal Crotty, the Defence Forces case with Natasha, was it? And in terms of all of those kind of quick fixes, the Tory Towie, was it?
Tory Towie was the woman who was detained in Dubai, yes.
So within the party, it seems that Heather Humphreys is his absolute, who's kind of a bit like a sort of matriarchal figure in Fine Gael, and they are seen to be very close, which means that she has his back and they complement it. So she's the old dog for the hard road sort of person, and very rural, whereas he is seen as younger and so on. So it's a good blend, and she is deputy leader of the party. He has yet to show his teeth. He dropped the ball with Helen McEntee, in the appointment. Like, there's no one he sacked, really. Like, others got rid of Simon Coveney and told him, you know what I mean, and he exited stage left. So the first challenge he's going to have is when the candidacy thing concludes, he's going to receive representation. You should add this person, or you should go for that in areas where they have candidacy problems. And there's going to be people giving out about him, is what I'm saying. And so he's never faced that yet, where people will put it up to him and disagree.
But sorry, will he be able to say, well, Alwyn Enright's doing that?
Well, put it like this, the truth is you can have your alibis, but if you look at Enda Kenny's, came in, he took over the leadership of Party 2002 at a really low ebb. By the time he finished up in 2017, it's so attritional, the job as a party leader. And that's actually one of the things of Micheál Martin, that he actually seems to get rid of people and dispose of people without too much acrimony. But the nature of it is, like, you take the Phil Hogan situation. Phil Hogan blamed...
Sorry, Dr. Phil, you told us
absolutely.
recently. We have to refer to him now as Dr. Phil.
He's a doctor of political science, and for his services to democracy. And a very worthy recipient from UCD, I might add. But so after Golfgate, he felt that Leo and Coveney effectively sacked him, you know what I mean, and he blamed them. And he, from that day on, was going to try and do Leo and Simon in every opportunity he got in the long grass. So that's the type of attrition I'm talking about. Actually, that happens all the time.
Yeah, but tell me, so how much of a role does Phil Hogan have in advising Simon Harris?
Oh, well, put it like this. I certainly think that Simon Harris is sensible enough and cute enough to know that the experience of the guy who led the election to win 76 seats for Fine Gael is advice, both at constituency in the 41 constituencies and at national level, that you cannot be without. And also how to, realise your best friend is your biggest enemy.
Yeah, but hold on. Was that 76 votes in 2011 actually really a vindication of the campaign run by Fine Gael, or just a plague on Fianna Fáil's house, we're getting you out, and Fine Gael was sort of the obvious alternative?
Well, sorry. You've got to look at the historic high of getting 36% of the vote. Fine Gael haven't done it before or since, and may never do it. And of course the Troika factor, and Fianna Fáil imploded down to 20 seats. All of that. But Gilmore could have, taken more seats for Labour. The fact of the matter is they got candidates in, they got the third seat here and there, which takes a heck of a lot of doing. The bar is much lower for Harris now. But the point is this, that I would say that Phil would be able to distinguish the wheat from the chaff. You're getting this advice, how to deal with the civil servants, who's really on your side, what you need to watch out for, who is, pretending to be your closest, most loyal lieutenant, but they're only actually looking to elevate themselves to be your successor. All that kind of good stuff of the jockeying for position and the backstabbing. All it's
interesting that you're saying all this about the role of Heather Humphreys and Phil Hogan, two of the more mature people still active within Fine Gael, because an awful lot of the stuff that was written about Pat Leahy, or not by the likes of Pat Leahy, about Simon Harris around the time of when he reached the 100 days mark, was emphasising the cabal of young people around him in the department of the Taoiseach, that he's brought in very energetic 30-somethings. But you're actually saying that you believe he's still listening to the older voices.
Well, I would say that the coterie of the hired help, as I call them, right? The Sarah Bardens, the Chris Donahues and all those good people, they're all spin doctors, really. They're all into the politics of the latest atrocity. They'd be saying, oh, look at this opportunity here. You could be on the 9 o'clock news if you did this, that and the other. So, and I think that's quite shallow. Like Bertie said, my advice to him when he took up the job is to concentrate on a few things and deliver on that, which is what Enda Kenny did about jobs in 2011. So I would be worried about that he's seen as a somewhat superficial, sort of quick fix, TikTok, Instagram Taoiseach.
Well, then let's move to his idea, which he floated at the McGill Summer School, which we didn't get an opportunity to talk about as promised a few weeks ago, but I think is important. This idea that there would be a Minister for Infrastructure, and then by implication that there would be a special government department that would be set up to do this, because this is very interesting, because it sort of fits in with something that has been a theme of this podcast since we started it earlier in the year, that if we're going to deal with the enormous explosion in population which is already happening and which is expected to continue, so much so that we could have another 1.7 million people living in the country within the next 35 years, bringing us to over 7 million people. Now, this is projection, and that might be in the higher end of things. But even if we hit lower end, we're still going to have an awful lot more people living in the country, which means we need an awful lot more houses and apartments for them to live in. If we're going to have houses and apartments, we're going to need the water supplies to actually go to all of those locations. We're also going to need the electric power to go, which means that it's going to be an enormous amount of work in actually the infrastructure delivering the power, as much as it is in actually putting the new wind farms in place, both onshore and offshore, and various other things which are very, very expensive to do, and which, if you look at things like the National Children's Hospital and the Metrolink for Dublin, we don't actually have a great track record of doing on time or to budget.
Yes, this is undoubtedly, in my opinion, leave party politics and personality politics aside, this is the most important issue for Ireland Inc. and Irish society, that between 2025 and 2035, we actually deliver on all the infrastructure. Water, Greater Dublin area, absolutely vital to get the Shannon Water Service project, 5 billion project, 170 kilometres, will provide water to 1.7 million people, not only, but in the commuter counties, in Kildare and Tipperary as well.
Sorry,
that must happen.
Yeah, but is that worth doing if, when the water is pumped to Dublin, more than half of it leaks out in Dublin?
Well,
if you're going to justify the political flack that there will be, because believe me, there will be major campaigns in rural Ireland against diverting the Shannon, you have to simultaneously show, well, yes, we're putting the money into this, but we're also sorting out all of the various pipes in Dublin so that the water that's pumped from the Shannon just doesn't get pumped into the ground in Dublin.
Well, about 500 million has been spent on leaks. Every water system in the world has about 10% leaks. They feel they'll get the leaks to under 20%. The reality of the soil and the underground and the overlay of broadband and gas pipes and so on means this is very costly and so on. So put it like this. This project there's no discussion about this. There's no one else people can go to. If I want to build, 60 or 1,600 houses in Clonburris or wherever, the fact of the matter is it cannot be done without water and wastewater treatment in Clonshock. There is no one else going to provide this, only the state. So Irish Water have a monopoly in this regard, and if people don't get it, that this has to be done, we will have a disaster in the Greater Dublin area, which, Dublin is the only city of scale. So therefore, if you want to develop Ireland, you've got to go to a city of scale.
Yeah, but you know what? I think that if we are going to 7 million people, then we have to make sure that Cork and Limerick and Galway and Waterford if not cities of international scale, have to be cities of much bigger scale than they are at present.
Accepted.
And that would also require infrastructure as well.
But even the best ratio is for every one new person in Dublin, there'll be one in the whole of the rest of the country. That's the most...
That's not in the national planning framework.
You're not going to have two... You're not going to have two international airports or whatever. So what I want to say about this is that on the specific proposal of the Department of Infrastructure, so we would have the Department of Energy, which deals with the gas network and all of that. We would have the Department of Transport that deals with the issue of Dublin Airport, 32 million cap. We have the Department of Environment, which deals with water and with housing. Now, it's going to take you 2 years to put a new brass plate of infrastructure delivery. I actually felt that to reinvent structurally all that will cause huge civil service resistance. The other thing...
Sorry, because you're just actually putting in my mind, because what you're saying there is that suddenly that there are functions that the Department of Energy has, the Department of Transport has, the Department of the Marine, whatever.
Yeah, for ports, Dublin Port,
right.
Yeah.
So suddenly they'll be taken out, is it, of these departments and moved to a Department of
then
Infrastructure?
You have operational issues.
Or will there be duplication?
You have foreshore licenses, you've for offshore wind, all of those issues. What I'm saying is this, the actual structure of putting this into one consolidated department will take a decade. And in the meantime, the grass is growing.
We don't have time to...
Exactly.
Yeah.
So... if you actually drill a little deeper, so what is the problem with Clonshock? And I've actually spent the last few weeks studying this problem because, with wind farms and with Clonshock and Irish Water, what is the problem with our planning system? And I want to call it out for what it is, because this is a little bit complex. Since 2014, Ireland has moved to a situation, whether it's a ring road or whether it's a wind farm or whatever, or a sewerage project, it's gone from 8 years to 15 years to deliver it, right? Why is that? It is because the law library and the legal system has moved into the most lucrative area of judicial reviews. Every major project in this country ends up in the High Court now. This has enriched the pillaging of the planning system, which doesn't happen in any other country, is absolutely outrageous, and it needs to be solved by capping fees at 40 grand. They're doing this in the UK. It's one of Starmer's big ideas, is that we're not going to make it profitable to you anymore to get a huge award for costs in winning case. So if you say, the Habitats Directive, you can't possibly build this, and someone goes along with an objector and they get a good lawyer and they frustrate it for years and so on, and it goes back to ground zero, which happened with Clonshock. We have two unique systems. There's only 3 countries in Europe, believe it or not, that allow third-party objectors. You go to Northern Ireland, only the first party can object to a planning decision.
So explain to people first party, third party.
Yeah, so a neighbour, actually someone in Mullingar objecting to something in Wexford. We have a system, only 3 countries in Europe, Malta, I forget the other country, that actually says you are entitled as a citizen to object to a planning thing. That doesn't arise in every other country.
So, for example, one of the reasons we lost Apple and the data centre in Athenry was objections from somebody over in your part of the world.
So, the second thing that's happened with judicial reviews is that Bord Pleanála are so terrified that they're going... So they make a decision to grant something, it goes through judicial review, they're defeated. They have 10 million in costs in the last few months awarded against them. So now the board are saying, well, we've got to protect ourselves against this. We're going to refuse it, so we won't be open to a judicial review. This has turned into an absolute gravy train. And Rossa Fanning, the AG, spoke to the Bar Library about this and say, actually, hold on a second, lads. What you're doing is against the state's interests. It's against public policy across the political spectrum, and people are going to point you out. And the appointment of the next AG is going to be the most important appointment in the next government to deal with this issue and say, we're just not going to put up with this anymore. The second problem that we have, one is the third party objection, is that us in the UK are the only jurisdictions legally that have a common law system, whereby the rights of an individual, again, to object to something, supersede. In other countries, in the continent, they have statute law instead of common law. And so therefore, if it's public policy, we're going to build 50,000 houses. They need water, they need electricity. Ergo, it will be facilitated. And that is it. And this is why people point to Singapore and other countries. How come they can get stuff done? So Ireland has moved to being the most uncompetitive country in terms of delivering these infrastructure. So we have this massive capacity restraint. And it's actually not just departmental red tape. It's actually the planning system. And I want to know which politician is going to have the balls and the spine to take this on.
Okay, I'm going to take a slightly different direction in relation to this, because another thing that we have constraints upon us is in relation to carbon emissions. And we need carbon reductions over the next decade, and that will continue after 2030 as well. So if you're talking about a population of 7 million people, right? And I mentioned that we're going to need houses for them and the rest of it, but we will also need infrastructure like schools, and we need to expand our universities and whatever. But we'll need more roads. But every time now you suggest more roads, you go, no, you can't be doing that. The money has to go into public transport instead. And yes, I agree with the idea. I think Metrolink is much needed for Dublin. It'll probably need to be bigger than it actually is envisaged. We need to be putting public rail into Cork and into other places. But even in doing so, there's likely to be the need for more roads because of the fact we have a bigger population, more roads on which these electric cars can go. But if you want to do things like, say, an outer ring road for Galway, you get caught up in the objections for the things that you've already mentioned under EU habitats directives and stuff. But you also fall into the lobby who'll say, well, you can't build a road because of the carbon emissions involved in the construction of the road, even if it's all electric cars that end up using it. And I think we actually are going to find it very, very difficult to build all of the things that have to be built to deal with the growing population without breaking all of the various climate change requirements of our legislation.
Well, within those EU obligations, which are now part of climate law and carbon plans each year, the most significant, in my opinion, is a thing called RED 3, Renewable Energy Directive 3. That says by the 1st of February next year, we must have 42% renewable electricity. Now, we actually got to 35% over the last few years, and we've stabilised at that because there's no more onshore wind actually being approved. So the reality is we are very quickly going to move to the stage that unless we actually electrify our motor system, electrify our heating and transport systems, we will be in breach of this. And we face fines of up to 8 billion a year.
You know,
I'm sorry, can I just say, someone said to me that we have the presidency in the latter half of 2026. We cannot have a situation that we have looming fines as president. It would be an act of national and international embarrassment.
Okay, well, then you also have, I think, if we're talking about the projections for population, there's also social and cultural issues in relation to this, which can actually be allayed by having the proper infrastructure in place. Because, you know, one of the things that we hear is Ireland is full. Ireland isn't full. We have plenty of land available to us to be able to host many, many more people, even more than the 7 million in the Republic. And I'm not even taking a unified Ireland by 2057 into account in those figures. But what if we are going to make sure that people are happy with the arrival of all of the new immigrants and with a bigger population, then we are going to actually have to do all of these things. The infrastructure is essential for making sure that we don't have social and civil unrest.
Absolutely. And all this will be visited on the have-nots. So what is the solution if I'm saying a Department of Infrastructure won't actually provide a silver bullet? One of the interesting things from the new planning bill, which is almost enacted, is that they have the big bazooka that the Minister for Planning can do is they can tell Cork County Council or any one of 31 local authorities, you have to deliver X megawatts of wind, or you have to facilitate this water or sewerage development, or else housing is going to be refused. And this was called an SPPR, a Special Planning Policy Requirement, whereby he issues a directive that you must change your county development plan. He issues, or she issues, a directive that Bord Pleanála say this is a national priority. So this actually happened in relation to apartments in Owen Murphy's time, where Fingal and Dunleary and City Centre had different specs for bedsits and apartments. So they introduced an SPPR to actually say, this is the uniform situation about apartments, which meant there was so much confusion and regulatory complications that it had to be overcome. What the planning bill provides for is a replacement of a ministerial directive where Owen Murphy could be shot down, is a whole of government national policy guideline or national policy statement. So what I think the next government should do, and what they should put in their manifestos, is say that on these issues of wastewater, a national facility, or water or electricity, that they would say that they would direct that the planning system, and from judicial reviews backwards, suck this up.
Okay, we will need to take a break. And actually, you know what I forgot to say at the start of this podcast was, are you coming to see us? Are you coming to see us either in Dublin or in Cork? Because we are going to be at the Olympia on September the 11th, which is a Wednesday night, with special guests, hopefully with us as well. And we'll be doing the same in Cork. Path to Power podcast live performance on Friday, September 13th. The one in particular in Dublin, great timing, because the night before you will have Kamala Harris and Donald Trump doing their presidential debate on television. So we'll have an opportunity to talk about that as well as all the domestic issues.
And will you bring your full array of shirts?
Listen, just because I'm a well-dressed person.
You know, because they usually have an intermission or something like that. You could change your shirt. God help us.
God help us indeed. Anyway, we will take an intermission now for a little bit of commercial advertising, and then we'll be back with the rest of Path to Power after this. Welcome back to Path to Power, and this is a special pre-recorded edition while we're on our summer holidays, and something that's going to happen next year. And there's a year and a little bit left in the reign of President Michael D. Higgins. But the jostling and the positioning is going on already in relation to who might run for the Áras. And I suppose it's X factor of politics, isn't it? It's a bit like an entertainment show. We certainly had a bit of fun when we were working with Virgin Media Television back in 2018, interviewing the various candidates.
We were horrible to the Dragon's Den people, weren't we? Such a bunch of losers, I called them one night. Have ever such a bunch of losers been put before the public? How many Dragon's Den
people? There was Casey, there was Sean Gallagher.
Gavin Duffy. Yeah.
My God, three Dragons, 10 people. Stop. Of course, Michael D wouldn't come to our debate. He knew he didn't have to because he had the whole thing sewn up and wrapped up at that stage. So we had a debate amongst all the rest of them in the studio, which, Jesus, was a motley crew indeed. Who will be part of that motley crew when it comes to the next time in 2025?
Well, first of all, I think you put your finger on something very significant there. I think in 2011 and 2018, Michael D's candidacy frightened away heavyweight opponents to him. The fact that he's not standing, the fact that there is no obvious, clear heir apparent who, and let's be clear, Mary Robinson, Mary McAleese and Michael D were never party leaders, but they were someone, who really, 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 in their political career wanted to be president. Most people that I've dealt with who are kind of on the conveyor belt of power politics, the park isn't on the radar.
This is why I don't believe Micheál Martin wants to be president.
That's a fair point.
Right? Because, and he said specifically recently, I want to be Taoiseach again. That's where Micheál Martin's ambitions reside. And he doesn't want to be Taoiseach for 6 months and to be resigning the position of Taoiseach to then be running for a presidency that he may not get. If he's back in government, either as Taoiseach or Taoiseach, and knowing that he'll be one or the other for half of the term because of things, he is not resigning that position to go off on a run for the Áras.
So therefore, we know the timing of this election is November 25. So now you're speculating that they get 45 seats, that the government, as is with independents or whatever, are returned. He gets first dibs at being Taoiseach, the largest party, which I think is probable. And he'll say, right, I'm entitled to 2.5 years. That gets you, we'll just say, from January 25 to, July 27. So therefore, the window of opportunity just doesn't present itself. And I think, in the game of musical chairs, the timing of this and the timing of the formation of the next government, it's impossible to say. But I do think that in terms of, if you ask me to do a set of odds on this, I would put Micheál Martin as favourite, because maybe he won't be Taoiseach again. And given his approval ratings of 48%, I think he is the most... Fine Gael have never won the presidency.
It's only if Fianna Fáil are in opposition that he becomes an option.
Or change a leader.
Well, the only way there's a change of leader in Fianna Fáil is if they're in opposition.
No, there's one circumstance where that mightn't be the case, whereby just say, and I'm not saying this will happen, the arithmetic of FF-SF government came up, not as Sinn Féin be the largest party, but just say someone decided, well, instead of these old blue shirts, we'll deal with Sinn Féin, and say Sinn Féin...
They'd have to oust Micheál Martin to get that done.
That would be a pill he wouldn't swallow.
Unlikely, I think.
Yeah, I accept that, but you can't rule out politics.
See,
You're the one who says how unpredictable it is.
Well, it is, but there is another point that actually has to be taken into account, is that Fianna Fáil didn't run a candidate in the last presidential election or in 2011
That's
either,
what I'm saying about
right?
Michael D. Yeah, absolutely.
So the fact that Fianna Fáil have passed twice means they will not pass again in 2025 to be a serious political party.
So if not Micheál, who?
Bertie Ahern.
Yeah, so that first of all, the thing I'm saying about Mary Robinson, Mary McAleese and Michael D, they really wanted the job. So let's look around and say, who really wants this gig, right? And there are people. Frances Fitzgerald wants it. Mairead McGuinness wants it. Yeah, but in Fianna Fáil, who wants it?
I would have said possibly Eamon O'Queeve until he recently retired from politics.
Yeah.
Or announced his retirement to the next general election.
Mary O'Rourke is not well enough.
No,
okay.
no.
So Bertie Ahern. Let's talk about Bertie Ahern. So first of all, Bertie Ahern would love it as a swan song. Bertie Ahern...
there's a bit of he'd loved a little bit out of a justified.
And it'd be such a comeuppance for his... from the tribunal and all that kind of thing. And the truth of it is, he is Marmite. Like, to younger people, to young people, like I remember when I'd be on radio and any time, because I used to have him on quite a lot, the text would light up. How can you have this? They almost treat him like a war criminal in terms of the tribunal, and they just couldn't say bad enough things about it, which I actually think, I'm a great believer in elections. He is the only person who won 3 consecutive elections in modern Irish history. And he got over 40% for his party. And you know what? I don't see anyone around in the current firmament that can do that. And fair dues.
So I could see him winning the presidency, but it would be a divisive victory. So let me put it like this, that if there's a big field, you could possibly win the presidency with 25% of the first preference vote.
On transfers? Do you not think he might be transfer toxic?
Well, there is that, but the others could still fall away unless, there might be somebody else who's a strong candidate who'll start picking up. But you could have that thing, it's lots of people go, this is a disgrace. The man who never had a bank account, who told ridiculous stories.
He made it on the horses, which is hard to do.
Well, you know that. And,
okay. I don't think Bertie's a credible candidate, to be honest with you. I mean, put it like this, I think actually Bertie himself finds it kind of nice, the speculation
because
about
people
him.
are talking about him still.
Exactly.
He's still a relevant figure.
And also the Good Friday Agreement and all that.
But you know what I think he loves most at the moment than anything else is the fact that he gets turned to as an eminent Greece to talk to about the Anglo-Irish relations.
Is there a bit of a tone in your voice there?
Well, yeah. Is there
Are you sneering at him?
No, he likes
I think actually some of his insights I actually think are worthwhile.
That Leo Varadkar would have turned to him, that even Simon Harris has had a conversation with him about Anglo-Irish relations. He loves the idea that he still is relevant.
The default position, though,
perceived to be relevant.
The default position is that you need a woman. So is there a female that Fianna Fáil could support? Put it like this, they could also do something completely different. They could turn to Sir Bob Geldof or someone like that and say, you know what?
Well, I tell you, you'd have to drop the Sir if you're appearing on the ballot paper for our presidential election.
What I'm trying to say is a big name parachuted into it. You know what I mean? Someone, and obviously in that regard, I think a person that might said no before but might be possible is Miriam O'Callaghan.
No.
Okay. She's a neighbour and friend of yours.
Yeah,
she'd be there in Ranelagh sipping lattes with you.
Your geographic knowledge is useless. You are utterly useless.
But you're not down in hardcore Rathmines now. Let's be fair about it.
But there you go. No, and I'll tell you why I think Miriam would be ruled out, and she has ruled
She's
her
a
out.
woman. She's liked, genuinely.
Well, she's
genuinely liked.
She is. Her husband's new job. Steve Carson has just returned to RTE.
Therefore, she could
from
leave
head of
RTE.
the- No. It doesn't work like that because he'd still be in RTE. He's the head of all visual in RTE now. Major job, effectively working hand in glove.
Do you
with
not think
Kevin
she'd be a strong
Backhurst.
candidate for Fianna Fáil?
I've no doubt that she would be a very strong candidate, and I'm very, very, very fond of her. She is,
Yeah,
an
she's
absolutely
actually a lovely person.
She's and she's also great fun.
Yeah.
She is actually.
She'd be a good president. And I put it like this: I think the
I
circumstances.
genuinely don't think she don't think she has any interest in putting herself forward for it.
Oh.
I would be amazed if she
Well,
did.
put it like this: the reason she said no in 2018 and 2011 was the fact that her RTE career was still in full flow and had a journey to travel still. I think that may not be the case in 25, and I just wouldn't dismiss it. And I actually think her husband's appointment, Stephen appointment, is actually facilitating that. But Fianna Fáil's first dibs would be to look for a woman. If Micheál is not in the picture and if Bertie isn't really considered to be the one.
What about your old party, Fine Gael?
Yeah.
Would
So-
would Enda be interested in going for it? 'Cause
Well-
Enda Kenny strikes me as somebody, I mean, we've talked about it earlier in this podcast about Simon Harris's like him in the
Yeah.
way that he likes dealing with people. Enda Kenny going around the country, shaking hands with everyone, the likability. I mean, in some respects, even as Taoiseach, he was like a great maitre d' for the country, which is what the presidency is sometimes about.
First of all, Fine Gael have never won it. Tom Higgins went
Yeah.
close and was beaten by Erskine Childers. So this is on their to-do list nationally, historically. They would like to do it. So the short list, in my opinion, would be Mairead McGuinness went before the convention and Gay Mitchell beat her. A huge mistake by the party, but I'm not saying Mairead would have beaten Michael D anyway. But Mairead, I think, did a good stint as commissioner. She was a vote-getter, one of the largest in the country.
Does doing a good stint as commissioner, as you describe it, in any way attract votes in the presidential election?
No, sorry, she got a huge vote as an MEP. She topped the poll in Midlands Northwest and brought in a running mate. Next up, so she's on the list. Frances Fitzgerald is the mentor of all mentors to Simon Harris, and she has left Dublin MEP. She's keeping a high profile and she wants it. Sean Kelly wouldn't rule it out. Heather Humphreys mightn't rule it out. And Kenny is in the frame. So there you go. In my opinion, Mairead McGuinness will probably be the candidate, but I think that the role of a Fine Gael candidate might be to, say if it was Micheál Martin, for example, to provide transfers, against a left-wing candidate. The Sinn Féin candidate.
Yeah, who's that going to
John
be?
Finucane.
Okay.
That's what I've heard. John Finucane could be the candidate. I don't think it'll be Jerry Adams.
Well, okay, so
there are circumstances it could be Mary Lou.
Okay, yeah, but, I was going to ask about that,
Yeah.
but just to explain, there might be a lot of people who are not familiar with who John Finucane is.
Well, I'm not that familiar who he is, but he's based in Belfast. He's a lawyer. He's
Son of Pat Finucane.
Yes,
who
yeah.
was murdered by British forces.
Yeah, you tell me. I mean, the situation is that he's an MP, is he?
Yes.
Yeah, and he was re-elected in the recent general election. I heard his name from those sources as someone who might be someone. I'd say they will. I mean, other than Mary Lou, who else in the South could they run? Would they run Michelle O'Neill?
Well, I was just about to say Michelle O'Neill, I think, could do exceptionally well. Also born in Cork,
Yeah.
remember that as well. Has shown herself to be a very empathetic leader. And I've said this on the podcast.
She doesn't have
before.
a Cork accent, though.
No, she doesn't. But,
Well, you wouldn't afflict her with that.
but
Have to be nice to the people of Cork.
You would be there on the 13th of September in the Opera House, yes. I suppose her role is perhaps too important as First Minister for her to surrender that to take a run.
It's a real job,
president, where she mightn't actually win it. A lot depends on Sinn Féin's position as to how well they actually
If they don't go into
in the general
government,
election.
they might want, to make a national statement. Remember they ran Martin McGuinness. Mary Lou might fit the bill there because there will be a demand for women. So on the independents then, on my list to discuss, Michael McDowell, Gerard Crockwell, Emily O'Reilly. Luke Ming Flanagan has said he'd like to stand. Who is a Dana type figure that might emerge? Peter Casey will stand. Blind Boy could stand.
Actually, sorry, I'll tell
Conor
you.
McGregor could stand.
Okay,
Sean Gallagher can't be stopped from standing.
It's funny when you mention people like Blind Boy and Conor McGregor, and immediately people go, come on, you can't be serious, blah, blah, and the rest of it.
Dustin.
Well, no, I'll tell you who there were strong rumours last year that Michael D. Higgins was looking to endorse a candidate.
Yeah.
You're going to look at me as Tommy Tiernan, right?
Right.
That Michael D. has a major graw for Tommy Tiernan, who he regards as an intellectual figure.
Yeah.
Who he regards as a deep thinker about issues. And there was even talk that...
I'm on my way to petty powers as you've said this, because I can actually say, ka-ching, that is actually, I could see him being elected.
Yeah.
Because people look at something lighter, shade, you know, the serious business of professional politics, party politics. He is someone that actually would tick a lot of boxes. You know, went through a period where he's on the dole, very relatable, also will provide national entertainment from the park, might pursue causes and so on. Like, you know, we have a stand-up comedian running Ukraine. Why not Ireland?
No, he's done controversial things in the past, jokes about the Catholic Church, which that doesn't seem to inhibit anyone anymore.
Yeah.
He's made comments about travellers in the past, which he may regret now and the rest of it. That said, given the Peter Casey vote in the last presidential election, that might actually help him. My understanding is that
his TV show is a rating success.
Oh, it has transformed,
and
public
it's ahead of the
perception
Late, I think, in some cases. Yeah.
And my understanding is that meetings have been held.
Right. Would he run as a Dana type figure?
An independent. No, I suppose there is this thing.
It might suit the political parties to stand back, because it costs a lot of money to run these campaigns.
Can Michael D. Higgins be seen to anoint his successor? Would Irish people actually go for that?
But I'm saying with or without Michael D., he has a chance. It's interesting. I hadn't heard his name mentioned. I'm going to have to check the Paddy Power odds straight away.
Conor McGregor could actually
please
get a nomination.
I heard he won a fortune on Spain. Did you hear that? In Spain winning the Euros, yeah. Like a really serious amount of money.
Oh, he's a gambler now as well as everything else, is he?
Well, that's not a crime. Last time I checked.
No. Anyway, you see...
Outrageous disapproval, but not...
It depends on how you get the nomination. Do you remember this whole thing? I mean, it became, I think Dana was the one who pioneered it, getting four...
I can't believe you're seriously speculating, as the most woke person in Ireland, that Conor McGregor would be president. I just cannot believe you're trying to sustain that thought.
You know that I have a €20 fine for you for every time you call me woke.
Would that apply in the Cork and Olympia?
I think actually, now that you've called me the most woke person in Ireland, it's going to have to be increased to 200. Listen to me for a second, yes. All right? Some of the people who've got nominations from councils before, remember 4 councils, Gemma O'Doherty got certain councils to nominate her, or got one at least, and she nearly got the 20 threshold between TDs and senators to secure a nomination. Yeah. I'd say an awful lot of those people are deeply embarrassed now that they did agree to support her in 2018.
And also the large number of independents elected in this raft of councils will facilitate more independence.
So I don't think that there are going to be enough councils that would give Conor McGregor a nomination. Then it becomes, would he get 20 TDs and senators after the next election, after the next general? Would there be enough people of a sort of a mind to support the incendiary comments he's been made about immigration? Look, I don't think it's going to happen. I think it's a complete
Tommy Tiernan is much more credible than that.
Yeah, I'm just telling you that there are routes to getting a nomination beyond the mainstream political parties.
Yeah, it will be a nice sideshow after the general election.
So that's it for today. Thank you very much for being with us for this special edition that we recorded a little bit of advance of its release because we're having a holiday. But don't forget, you can see us live in September when we bring Path to Power, the podcast, on tour. And we're going to the Olympia Theatre in Dublin on the 11th of September. It's a Wednesday night. And then we go to the Cork Opera House as part of the Cork Podcast Festival on the Friday evening, which is Friday the 13th.
So how do you buy tickets?
Good question. Ticketmaster.ie if you want to buy tickets for the Olympia event, the corkoperahouse.ie or corkoperahouse.ie if you want the tickets for the Cork event. So that's different addresses or different ways of buying for each. You go to ticketmaster.ie if you want to see us in Dublin. You go to corkoperahouse.ie if you want to see us in Cork.
I need to take a lie down after all that.
Well, you probably get a drink as well, will you? By the way, €30 the max price you will get on the tickets, and that's taking all the fees and everything into account as well. Hopefully you'll find, I regard that as being good value for hopefully the entertainment and insight that Ivan and myself...
We might even have special guests as well.
We will have special guests indeed, just a little bit, but we're not telling you their names yet. Until next week, thanks for joining us.